Welcome everyone. We'll just give it a second, just while we can see the numbers go up. Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining IAB Europe's Virtual CTV Event. My name is David Goddard, and I'm Senior Director of Business Development for DoubleVerify, and I'm also the Chair of IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee. And I have the pleasure of moderating today's event from IAB Europe. As many of you know, IAB Europe is the European level association for digital marketing and advertising ecosystem. Through its membership of national IABs, media, technology, and marketing companies, its mission is to lead political representation and promote industry collaboration across Europe. And one of the ways we like to do that is by bringing people together through our events, like the event we have today. And I want to highlight that IAB Europe and myself are very grateful to our sponsors for this event, OneTrust and Magnite, who have helped make this event possible. As with so many other events, we usually would have had a live event to discuss connected TV, but we're delighted to be able to bring you this virtual event to explore the many interesting facets of connected TV. It almost feels right that we're streaming this content around CTV through screens around the world. But why are we focusing on connected TV today? Well, globally, 44% of consumers state they're using CTV devices more since the pandemic began. And August in particular saw nearly 4 times as many CTV ad impressions as August 2019. This is a huge increase in demand for inventory, and it's accompanied by an increase in advertiser adoption. At DoubleVerify, we're also seeing 35% more unique advertisers delivering CTV impressions in August 2020 compared to August 2019. And I'm sure many others in the ecosystem are seeing similar data in CTV. Coupled with the premium environment and access into the front room of many households, CTV certainly is an exciting topic for all involved in advertising. And today we have a stellar lineup of speakers, moderators, and panelists in our sessions. We will shortly hear a deep dive into connected TV from our chief economist, Daniel Knapp. We will then hear from our panels, who will discuss the overall landscape and scale of connected TV. Then we'll hear about viewership and scale in the market. We'll then have a short break. And after the break, we will then hear from a panel on targeting and measurement. And finally, privacy and how it impacts on connected TV. I think it's going to be a fascinating couple of hours. And we are very grateful to all our experts for taking time out of today to share their knowledge and expertise. I just want to highlight every speaker is a member of IAB Europe. So if you'd like information on how to get involved with future activities, do please contact Helen or Charlie. Before we kick off, I just wanted to establish the stakeholder breakdown of the audience with a very quick poll. So if you wouldn't mind completing the poll on your screen now, I hope. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. I will then share the results before we kick off. You can actively participate in today's event as well, as each panel will be followed by audience Q&A. So if you have any questions for today's panelists, please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the window, a Zoom window. It should be next to this participants Q&A. In addition to the poll you just completed, we will also be launching a few audience polls to ascertain your opinion on specific topics throughout the event today. We appreciate your participation in these. So, thank you for completing the poll. And the results are in, I hope. Let's just see. Wow, fantastic. So the question we asked is, which stakeholder category do you represent? We have 3% of advertisers, 13% of agencies, 48% ad tech, 13% publishers, 1% media and press, hello, and other 23%. Interesting, fantastic. A large percentage on other as well. So great. Thank you very much, everybody. Now on to our first session, and it is a session in which our chief economist, Daniel Knapp, will do a deep dive into connected TV. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, David, for the introduction. I want to just give you a whistle-stop tour of the state of CTV advertising in Europe, and hopefully provide a foundation for the next panel to discuss the key opportunities and the main issues that this industry is currently facing. I deliberately called my presentation "Making a Market." It is pretty clear from David's statistics that there is a lot bubbling underneath the surface. Many vendors, many publishers are seeing tremendous growth in CTV, spurred by the pandemic. However, we also see that the narrative so far on CTV has primarily focused on the US so far. US statistics, US growth projections. Europe is quite a different animal. And making a market means to me that the potential for a mass market is here, but it's for us, for the industry, to really make this happen. Because this market isn't self-evident. We need to work together to really fully unlock the potential. What is this potential? And I quickly want to show that to you by doing a quick history lesson for all of us. I took here US data to show long-term ad spend by medium. And I focused on the US because luckily we have archives of ad data going back to just the end of the First World War. And we can really see how in the 60s here, when the rise of the consumer class came, when FMCGs, when automotive companies started seeing citizens or people primarily as consumers, you could see also with that an explosion of television advertising. And the rise of TV and the rise of consumer society, which has brought a lot of growth and wealth throughout the 20th century, has been inextricably linked, which means we are not talking about with CTV the transformation of any other old medium. We're talking maybe about the primary medium which has defined the consumer society in which we live in now. I deliberately stopped this chart here at 2007, which is before really we at IAB Europe started to chart the growth of the internet. And let's see what happened in the meantime. The television landscape that has fueled this consumer society has radically changed in recent years. I don't have to tell you that. But just to see how fragmented and how multifaceted it has become, let's have a look at this map. Globally and locally, very different players now competing for consumer attention, whether it's paid for or SVOD based. Now, and nearly every week passes with new announcements. So this week we saw the launch of Google TV, and also in the UK, Planet V, the new programmatic ad initiative from ITV, which has been in the making for a very long time, and finally is available in the market. All of this growth is backed up by really a change in the rise of connected devices. The first wave of video was really carrying video away from the living room to the laptops and then to the mobile handsets. And now we're seeing kind of the whole wave coming back, and we're seeing the digital infrastructure, connected devices, recolonizing the living room, which means although the majority of connected devices today are smartphones, the growth in this category is primarily coming from smart TVs, set-top boxes, game consoles, and so forth. So the living room becomes the new battleground for consumer attention, thus also disrupting television. And indeed, if we look at smart TV shipments, this of course isn't the entire installed base, but it provides a precursor to what the installed base looks like. We're seeing that smart TVs are rapidly becoming the default, providing a completely new ability to provide advertising and consumer engagement. All of this has also fueled by the pandemic. So we've seen a clear inflection point in a structural shift to digital access to premium content. This is pay TV and SVOD, but it's a telltale to what is going to happen in the free-to-air world as well. We're seeing with globally, not just in the US, we're seeing for the first time OTT subscriptions overtaking pay TV. And this will continue throughout the forecast period, spurred by now with the pandemic, no sports events available anymore, which was the main anchor for the pay TV experience. Fantastic new propositions, for instance, Disney Plus in its kind of first month acquired more subscribers than Now TV in its entire lifetime, and so forth. And we're also seeing that this cord cutting, which used to be confined to the US for a very long time, isn't a states-only phenomenon anymore, but it's now taking place across the world. They were really changing in the lived experience of consumers what television and access to premium content looks like. Similarly, if we look at the real impact of COVID-19 on the ad market, it's more than just doom and gloom, and of course a decline in the overall ad market in 2020. But again, if you look at this data, it's an inflection point to the structural shift to digital, as we will not see traditional media recover, just as happened in the 2009 recession. And that, of course, provides a very fertile ground to combine the world of television and the world of digital for a high-impact consumer ad experience. Indeed, many have said that we are living in the new normal and that consumption trends are changing. But actually, if we look at the linear TV consumption, we can see here data from Magna that globally the surge in linear TV consumption was fairly short-lived. Consumers reverted back to old ways of doing things or reverted to new screens, where we see consumption holding up much stronger, as David has already alluded to. And the pandemic has really fueled CTV consumption. We're seeing that in the US primarily. We look at Trade Desk, we're seeing that reflected in robust revenues. And we're seeing lots of charts from different vendors, different industry providers that at least indicatively show that also in Europe, the trend is on the rise. If you look at ad impressions delivered, etc. Now, all charts here have to be taken with a grain of salt, because I think there's a tendency of using this e-marketer style lower left to upper right charts, and we have to work together as an industry to really decipher what do these charts mean and create a robust empirical foundation for growth. Now, all of this means there's a significant opportunity for CTV advertising, all these trends coming together. If we look at the market in 2024, the overall AVOD revenue, desktop, mobile, and CTV, which is smart TV, which is set-top boxes and games consoles, we see it will have around 1/3 of the total opportunity. If we remove China, which is a bit of a special market, and if we remove Facebook and YouTube to move kind of in the classic environment, we can see that actually it's going to be nearly half of it all. And what's driving this is, of course, consumers are now used to a no-cord experience. We're seeing an acceleration also outside of the US. Consumers, as unemployment is rising, we're also seeing cord shaving, which means taking that over-the-top experience and applying it now to an ad-funded world. We have the loss of the sports events as the anchor subscription points, which I mentioned already, explosion of the streaming hours. We have audiences that were hard to reach, but are suddenly reconsolidated in front of the big screen. I think massive thing also, no third-party cookies. So there is a lot of development in the industry that doesn't need to focus on these very tricky questions. And also brands are really rethinking how they're doing marketing post-pandemic. Challenges as well, fragmentation. Consumers are used to ad-free experience. Some demographics will be harder to reach. And of course, with everything in digital, everything's going to be more complex. To navigate this opportunity, I think we need very clear definitions. And IAB Europe recently put out a guide to connected TV, which already puts a stake in the ground. And I really encourage all vendors, all market participants to develop a joint language, a lingua franca, so that we can describe the CTV opportunity. It doesn't help if everyone uses their own language and their own definitions of what CTV actually is. We need buyers to know what's going on, we need sellers to know what's going on, and only then can we build the appropriate propositions and infrastructures. All of this has, of course, also meant that there's a race to win this opportunity, and we've many more industry participants now vying for this massive television advertising opportunity, from device manufacturers to content aggregators, incumbents, and other new upstarts. I think a remarkable thing in Europe is, if you look at the size or the distribution of the TV ad revenue on the left side and digital advertising display here, banner and video on the right side, you see a much lower concentration of spend in the top markets, which means we have a lot of large television markets in Europe waiting to be innovated, in a sense, that are not just the UK and not just Germany. which means there's a potential to reach new audiences, to tap into a very large market beyond the top 3 or beyond the top 5 markets. There are, of course, barriers, and many of these will be known to you. These are US-centric barriers, which of course also apply in Europe: high CPMs, data integration, and so forth. Typical pain points for any emerging media channel that we also had at day 1 of programmatic. But there are some specific challenges to Europe as well, which we as a European industry need to solve. Who are the buying and selling responsibilities? That varies a lot between market and between provider. Where do we get the inventory from? We have to realize Europe isn't a single market, although we use the EMEA term very often, but very locally specific, with specific trading cultures, market configurations, and it's a one-by-one approach. We need to really be embedded in the markets to understand what's going on and help transform it. Data is an issue, and of course, regulation as usual as well. I think the key thing with all of this is, and also mentioned this robust empirical basis, how do we measure CTV? Is it TV native, if we talk about GRPs, is it digital metrics and so forth, or is it something in between? And I think if we look at the development, we got broadcasters, we've got digital natives coming together. CTV currently has some kind of what I would call a bicultural identity. It's like in Germany, when you grew up on the eastern and the western side of the Iron Curtain at the same time. And we have to resolve this and bring these worlds together. And I know as a German that unification is a very long process that can take, hopefully not 20 years for this ecosystem here. What's also clear is that we see a lot of statistics in this industry that have a vested interest. For instance, if we look at the data that I also recrunched, the Magnite data, and compare that to what other industry associations or what markets are putting out, we don't always see things adding up. So we need to stop this battle for interpretation and of gatekeeping and really work together to build this empirical foundation so we know what we're all talking about. This will be more beneficial to the industry than just relying on short-term business objectives. I think the key narrative in this is, if you look at the incumbents in Europe, collaboration and innovation has been a key theme. You've seen for a very long time collaboration in the new television space, if you will. But many of these first initiatives, as you see here blurred out, have been shot down by regulators. We've since seen an explosion of activities from streaming to joint investment to advertising and content. And if you look at the right of this chart, you can see how this gets denser and denser. And I think this is a great seismograph for really the potential that everyone in the market sees for CTV, be it for streaming, be it for pay TV, be it for advertising purposes. And we're also seeing, of course, new approaches that aren't really collaboration, but more about aggregation and market access, like for instance, Sky AdSmart with very different partners, or the new ITV initiative launched just yesterday, I believe. For us as an industry, and I see many ad tech players here on this call, we know from our recent study in IAB Europe that over half of video ad spend is now transacted programmatically. And the question is that happening with CTV? Well, we are in a supply constrained market still, so it's evident that there's very little, if no, premium inventory on the OMP. But with the size of the market, what's happening? We don't really have the data yet, but we do have attitudes. And we have some survey data that says that the programmatic opportunity hasn't really been realized yet in CTV. It still needs to be developed across the board. But there's a consensus on its long-term potential. It just needs to be activated. If we look at the different players here, we see in the typical hot topics that CTV ranks first as the major industry growth driver for programmatic across the entire value chain. But it's still unclear when this potential will materialize in a significant way. Next year, in 3 years, or in 5 years. We as an industry can really shape and accelerate this. Because I see this survey here not really as a reflection of what's going on, but rather as a mandate to the industry, a mandate to all of us to make it happen. So let's conclude. I think we have a perfect storm in 2020 that creates a massive accelerant for a long-term structural change of the TV ad opportunity, with CTV as the major winner. We need to look at a specific narrative for Europe, not just the US. But there's good news because of the specific local market structure. I don't really see what's some concern in the display landscape, a winner-takes-all approach. But there's space for everyone. We need to have a robust empirical basis for data, market size and so forth, and don't rely on marketing statistics, and then collaborate to make this opportunity happen and to make this market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That was a fascinating look into the details of connected TV. And I really like you calling out collaboration there, because it is critical for success, especially in our industry. We're now going to hear from our first panel of the day. This is the connected TV landscape and the opportunity in Europe. This is going to be moderated by Louise Dixon, Strategic Partner Lead for Google. And I just want to remind everyone to try not to forget that you can submit your questions using the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. And we'll review the questions and put a selection of them to the panel at the end of the session. Louise, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you. And see you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'll hand over to you now. So take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Hello, everybody. As David said, my name is Louise Dixon. I'm a strategic partner lead on the broadcast and entertainment team here at Google in the UK. And I'm going to be moderating the first of today's panels, where our topic will be the connected TV landscape and the opportunity in Europe. We're going to be discussing the fragmented landscape of trading and also highlight some of those key challenges, but also the opportunities for both the buyers and the publishers. As David mentioned, we will be finishing the session up with a Q&A. So we would be encouraging you to please submit your questions. And what a panel lineup that we have for you today. Joining me will be Jenny Antonio, Account Director for EMEA at Magnite, Jaden Grant, Solutions Consultant at IPONWeb, Emma Newman, who is Chief Revenue Officer for EMEA at Magnite, Graham Lynch, Vice President of Demand for EMEA at SpotX, and Chris Edwards, Director of Business Development for EMEA at Rakuten Advertising. So before we start talking about the buy and the sell side, I think it's pertinent that we really do start with talking about the user. As has been mentioned previously, these lockdown conditions of the pandemic have really catalyzed connected TV content consumption. And we've also seen such a resounding success of some new entrants. I know that Daniel also mentioned Disney Plus entering the EMEA market. And I read yesterday an industry analyst said that by 2024, they predict that Disney Plus will have 155 million subscribers. But what I'd like to do, first of all, is start with Chris and your take on this. Do you think that eventually subscription fatigue is going to start to set in? And does that mean that there may be a bigger opportunity for connected TV advertising?
Yeah, well, hi, Louise. I do think, obviously there's a lot of streaming choice out there, as David's map alluded to, and there's more to come. There's going to be more services launched in the coming months. Where I don't think there's subscription fatigue in terms of the user experience of them being overwhelmed by choice, where I do think there's fatigue is into the cost of it all. Rakuten did a survey earlier this year where we looked into the impact of streaming, of the appetite for AVOD. And one thing that came about from all European regions was that consumers were at the limit of their sort of spend that they were willing to put forward for subscription services. In fact, what we identified is those who are wanting to add another subscription service to their roster, they would be willing to cancel an existing one to make way for that one. So yeah, I don't think it's, demand is definitely there, but it's the fatigue is about the cost that's affected by it.
Makes sense. And Jenny, what would be your take on this from your experience on the user side? What do you feel like they're looking for in terms of that experience as well?
Yeah, so I think there is absolutely a historic shift in the way that content's being consumed as users migrate to new types of content. So through Samsung Smart TVs, they recently identified that in the UK, 59% of TV viewing is actually streamed through content taken over from linear. So, CTV is absolutely driving the eyeballs. Viewers are moving away from that traditional TV. And these are pretty powerful stats for any agency to see. But how it's delivered is critical. Viewers, they want that TV-like experience. And as an industry, we need to make sure that we can deliver on that. So, we can't underestimate the importance of the ad experience, and we must always put the user first. So I have 5 best practices. Number 1, ensuring really good quality content that viewers expect. So making sure that, you have good vetting and approval processes when you're onboarding new supply. Making sure that you're working with really good technology partners for things like dynamic ad insertion, so where you're inserting the ad into the stream. Competitive separation, it's critical that you don't ever have the same ad appearing back to back or against a competitor ad. And things like ad podding really enable those controls to manage that process. I'd say another thing is the creative volume control. So making sure that your content and your ad volumes are all at the same level so that you avoid that horrendous experience when, the sound shoots up during an ad break and then it's too low when you go back to consume the content. And then I'd say, finally, real-time reporting and troubleshooting are essential tools that really help to be able to act quickly on the fly when you're trying to troubleshoot those technical issues. So ultimately, CTV is really driving those eyeballs, and we need to make sure that we can adhere to those best practices.
So if CTV is driving those eyeballs, Emma, do you feel that the demand is in line with that? So I know we've heard in certain markets such as the UK and Germany, we are seeing that growth, but do you feel that that gap has kind of reduced in terms of supply and demand being more in line with each other?
Yes. Before I answer that question, could I just point out that I'm the CRO for PubMatic and not Magnite, as much as I love my colleagues over there, or unless he hasn't told me something. But when I woke this morning, I was the CRO for PubMatic. But let's get back to your question. So I do think that buyer behavior is changing. Obviously, there is generally a lag between when a consumer moves to when the buyers, I hate using this phrase, but when the dollars follow the eyeballs. Mm-hmm. And I think that the consumer shift has definitely been accelerated by COVID. But I also think the buying behavior has been accelerated by COVID as well. So maybe that delay won't be quite as large as we've seen in the past. I definitely think that, buyers are starting to see that this is where their audience is. So they are shifting budgets. But on the other side, I don't think it's a total shift. So I don't think they're moving everything out of linear television into connected television. I think what they're seeing is that they're using connected television potentially as a complement to their linear television plan. But I also think the buyers are struggling slightly, because this is quite new to everybody, in really trying to understand where to buy, what to buy, and why to buy it. And I think that once we can, once we've got a bit more experience in this space and we can start to answer those questions, then I definitely expect to see more budgets moving into this space.
So one thing that that Daniel would have mentioned in his presentation as well is that he said that half of spend has been transacted programmatically video, but not necessarily connected TV. I want on the kind of the where to buy and what to buy. Can I ask you around the kind of the who to buy? Do you feel like there's an education piece to be done within agencies? Is it sitting with the AB team? Is it sitting with the digital team? Who has the responsibility there?
Well, I think that's part of the challenge, because I think the AV teams think that CTV is digital, and I think the digital teams potentially are thinking it's a broadcast medium. And we've had that experience where we've gone in to talk to agencies and sort of, that you get sort of pushed from pillar to post. Nobody quite knows, who's responsible for this budget. And I think that's partly because it's new, and partly because maybe people are still trying to figure out, what to buy it for. Mm-hmm. Certainly, PubMatic, we believe that there is a lot of work to be done from an education perspective. And I think this is something that we can collectively do as an industry. But yeah, so I think that there is definitely a little bit of confusion perhaps within the agencies as to exactly who owns this budget.
Mm-hmm. And do you ever see a day whereby potentially connected TV spend would overtake traditional linear, or do you think that is a very long way off?
I honestly don't know yet, to be honest.
That's fair enough. I don't think any of us really do.
Yeah, I think that might be the $1 million question.
Exactly. Jayden, if I could pass to you as well to get your take on what you feel the main opportunities are on both for the buyer side of the fence. What are the challenges and both the opportunities that you would identify?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the main opportunity from kind of the buyer, the agency perspective really simply lies in the capability to deliver these digital ads on the big screen that are non-skippable, brand safe. You've got things like sound, etc. like that. So it's having that experience, from both the user perspective, but also the buyers being able to do that. A big part of it, which kind of comes with the digital piece, is obviously the data as well that you can both execute and activate, within these campaigns as well. I think probably the most significant benefit, particularly for the buyers and the agencies, is getting that incremental reach piece. Emma mentioned as well, obviously connected TV not overtaking linear, and I think this is something that's really important to talk about because, as we know at the moment, I think the stats recently were a 40% increase in BVOD since lockdown. We have those millennials, they're tough to find. They're not on the linear stream, so they're obviously going to the kind of more the streaming side of things. So, the audiences that you typically would find on your traditional TV, you're able to find them on the linear, sorry, not on the linear, on the CTV. So really, just back to the point of, CTV is meant to complement linear, not overtake it. Well, certainly not for now. So yeah, a lot of the benefits really just come from those digital capabilities that you see being delivered on the big screen.
Mm-hmm. And Graham, in terms of those opportunities and what you've been witnessing over the last 6 months as well, I believe you would have seen quite significant growth from your perspective, Graham, correct?
Yes, that's very much so. So I would say sort of Q1 2019, we were about 3% of our revenue was CTV across Europe. And in Q3 this year, we're at about 50% of our revenue is now CTV. And I would actually, I'm going to totally disagree with what Julian said at the start in terms of CTV isn't programmatic. Everything we do is programmatic. So all of that revenue is being driven by programmatic tools. And I would also say that a couple of other things on, it's strange how people assume that CTV is going to be all millennials, all younger audiences, and if you want older audiences, you have to actually go towards linear. That's not true. We did a piece of research called CTV is Everyone, and it showed across Europe that 44% of people are 35 to 54, and then 55 plus makes up 25% of the audience. So I would actually say CTV is now becoming the norm for all age groups, and that's what's driving the spend. I definitely agree with Emma, but there's a lot to be learned within agencies, and not around TV. They know everything about TV, but just about the execution and the education of how CTV and linear work and merge together. We're actually just about to launch an incremental solution with a third party, which I can't name at the moment because it's under a PR embargo. But we will be going to market with an incremental solution that will allow you to buy CTV and your online video and then look at it against your linear TV and your incremental reach. And I think that is probably the most important aspect of what everyone needs to try and do, is to show the value of CTV compared to linear.
But are you necessarily seeing that across every market as well? Like, let's kind of maybe take a step outside of the UK and have a bit of a focus on Europe. What are you seeing differently? Yeah,
so I think it very much depends. I think the audience-wise is very sort of standard across the market, across Europe. In terms of adoption, I think there's a lot of clients which are solely based on the UK, and what we're starting to see, the supply in other markets is starting to grow. But I think that sort of the UK has a much larger supply pool, and then you've probably got France, Spain, Italy, and Germany, which are now increasing dramatically, especially Germany. But the problem is people in Germany still watch a lot of linear TV. People in France are obviously IP, they actually work through their telco companies, and people in Spain are very much on their desktop and mobile. So that I think is changing. I think it's a user journey that changes, which then drives the actual advertising market. So I'd say that the UK is probably a year behind the US.
Yes.
And then the UK is probably ahead of Germany, which is on its own. And then you have probably sort of the continental Europe, probably a year behind the UK. But I see that changing. You know, everything we run isn't just the UK, it's actually across EMEA anyway. So.
Chris, would you agree with those points in terms of where you're seeing the differences across Europe in your own experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what Graham said there. You know, Rakuten TV is available in 42 markets in Europe, but the main penetration is within the big five. You know, UK, Germany, Spain, Italy, and France. In terms of users, like you touched on, you know, they do vary. UK and Spain, from our perspective, tends to be the ones that are at the forefront in terms of reach and scale. With Germany and France, you know, are coming quite close. There's an adoption that Graham alluded to between, say, the France and German markets, which is definitely apparent in our business as well. So, you know, in terms of the advertising space and how brands can access it, of course, you know, all 100% programmatic. We would apply pan-European media plans to advertisers just as much as we would for local markets. So, you know, the challenge is maximizing on the audience that you have in each market. But you know, we have that space and reach across all those regions, and it requires us to be a little bit creative, but the growth is definitely there. We've seen exponential growth since January this year, primarily fueled by the pandemic, but also because of the demand for free to view ad-funded content and quality content at that.
Jenny, can I get a quick point from you as well in terms of what you're experiencing with markets being at different stages of growth?
Yeah, well, we're seeing a lot of players coming into the market that are taking advantage of that AVOD. You know, they're all looking at how they can make money programmatically and sort of working out the best way to do that. And, you know, we're seeing, especially with territories like Spain, where there's real opportunity, again, to mirror what Graham and Chris said. We know they're heavy streamers. SVOD is still very strong there, but we're seeing real opportunity with the likes of Pluto, where they're about to launch right now. They're leveraging a lot of their Latin American content, plus they're also building out local language content too. Duke Media is another example of that. But I think the most important thing is that people don't always want to watch content in English. So that's something to also be aware of. And definitely buyers are dipping their toes into the CTV space. So, you know, they're preferring to buy that from local publishers with local language. So again, to reiterate, there's definitely an education piece there. I think France is a really interesting market as well, especially as the new French laws change. That will allow the national broadcasters to be able to be on the same terms as the likes of Google and Facebook, serving targetable ads. And I think slowly that will start to open up the programmatic pipes as well. So I think, yeah, it's an exciting time to watch the CTV space unfold and develop in these markets.
And Jayden, finally, if I could pass to you, it is an extremely exciting time, but what type of advice are you giving to broadcasters that you're working with right now?
Yeah, so I mean, look, it's fair to say that the broadcasters have been hit pretty hard. I mean, especially from COVID, you know, they're having to adapt to this new way of working, you know, since they operated before. So, I mean, I guess in terms of the advice we give to them is try to adapt to this new way via like automation platforms and using the power of that to execute their stuff, from everything from, you know, building a sales proposal to, you know, booking your inventory, seeing what inventory availability is out there. So we're really just trying to push them to go for that automation piece as well. Yes, that's kind of the main stuff that we would be saying to them at the moment.
Amazing. Thank you very much to the audience for giving us some questions for our panel. So I'm going to turn to the Q&A now. And the first of these is, the panel has mainly compared connected TV to linear TV. How does the panel think connected TV compares to other video sources? Should brands be replacing outstream video, for example, with CTV on their plans? Emma, maybe do you have a view on that one?
I think that it's not an either or. I think I mentioned before it's an and potentially. So I'm not sure that I would recommend anybody replace one with the other. I think what people need to think about is with all media planning is, what audience are you trying to achieve, and what is the objective and the KPI of your campaign, and then you work either with your agency or directly with the publishers to understand what's going to deliver that desired outcome for you, and you build your plan around that. So I don't want this to be CTV versus linear. I don't think that's how any of us view it. So it's really just thinking about what is it you want to try and achieve, and then build your plan accordingly.
Perfect. Anything to add from any of other panelists on that point?
I mean, I think to Emma's point, just in terms of how it can be viewed, I mean, the formats are completely different. You know, in CTV, it's non-skippable. Certainly from our perspective, very different to how you would scroll through outstream. So I think we compare it to linear because it's viewed on the biggest screen in the household. Yes, we are cross-device, but the majority are viewed on connected TVs, and that experience of immersing yourself in the platform is very similar to linear.
I have another question for our panel. So what is the added value of CTV compared to linear TV? And then any best practices to what type of creatives or materials perform best? Maybe Jayden, I could pass to you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main value here is really that audience buying piece. So being able to, track your audiences throughout that process as well, with the data, it really does have that extra bit of value. So yeah, that would be what I would say.
Any of our other panelists have a view on that?
Yeah, I think I would say that CTV, because you can buy it programmatically, so linear TV you have to plan. You've got the AB deadlines. I know there is late money, so I think that the value of what you do on your linear level is very much you plan and execute sort of like a long term, and then everything you can do on CTV is sort of very much complementary to what you're doing on your linear. So first of all, you're going to probably reach people you're not reaching on your linear campaign, but you're also then going to, as Jayden mentioned, you're going to use data targeting to then be more precise, but you're also going to be much more flexible with your actual execution. So you're going to be able to turn it on and off. You're going to be able to sort of change the creative whenever you want, and on a much quicker level. You're going to be able to understand which creative's working, which one isn't working, because you're going to get the data back through the workflow. So I think there's a lot of complementary aspects to what you're doing on linear to what you then do on your CTV campaign.
And probably also the opportunity to be a bit more creative with the assets themselves as well. Completely,
yeah. So I think the problem, unfortunately, one of the biggest problems is still that connection between linear and the CTV. I think we'll have the incremental reach, that connection, but actually understanding the user and understanding, have they seen this on linear, and then can you show them a different creative in a different environment on CTV? I think that obviously probably is maybe 6 to 12 months away, but it will come, and it's people like Rakuten or Samsung who own the box or own the TV that sort of connect the user in that way, and then create that sort of that messaging, that sequential messaging opportunity.
Thank you for that. I realize we are almost out of time, but we do have another poll for our audience, which I believe is going to appear on your screen quite soon. Here we go. So what do you think is the main barrier to connected TV inventory becoming mainstream? So if everybody would like to vote on this one, we will have some answers in just a moment. And I just want to take this moment as well to thank my panelists for coming along today and for their insights and thoughts on how the connected TV space is evolving. So I'm sure everybody would agree that it was fascinating to hear from you guys on this today. Now we're just waiting for our results to come in. Oh, there we go. So quite close on some of these. So what do you think is the main barrier to connected TV inventory becoming mainstream? And the fact that this is a fragmented market. I know this came up quite a bit today, 36%. And then at 26%, both hard to measure and not enough scale. And then 13% targeting restrictions. So some quite close there in terms of our audience view on this. So again, thank you very much to my panelists for this session. And with that, let me pass back to David.
Thank you very much, Louise. What a great panel. I really enjoyed that session and some really interesting points made. And I'm sure many people will be heeding your advice, I hope, all of you. But I just wanted to point out there, actually, the really interesting thing around the barrier that was mentioned, which was fragmented market. It comes back to what Daniel said at the start. We all need to work together to kind of fulfill the opportunity that is in CTV. I'm just coming back to Daniel's presentation as well. He quoted a couple of reports, IAB reports, and one being the Programmatic ad spend report and also attitudes towards programmatic report. Both of them are available on IAB Europe's website. So if you're looking for further information around a number of the topics that were spoken about on that panel and in Daniel's report, please go to the IAB Europe's website. Now on to panel 2, connected TV in practice. So this is looking at viewership and scale, and it's going to be moderated by the co-founder of Visnet TV, Stéphane, and he's also representing IAB France as well. So welcome, Stéphane. Are you there?
Hello. Hello, David.
Hello, Stéphane. You kept me waiting there. Heart was in the mouth. Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
Right, I'll hand over to you to take this panel 2 away. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So in some ways, what we'll try to do here is to come back to the basic. I mean, I'm talking about CTV in practice. Viewership and scale. I think this is really the question about how do you reach a large audience, and how do you know that you reach the right audience also? So it's really basic things for us in digital, also in TV, but connected TV is really bringing a lot of questions that we have seen in the past when mobile start to grow, for example, and so on. And this is now where we are. And to discuss all these topics, we have with us Martin O'Boyle from Publicis Media, Austin Scott from Xandr, and Julie Selman from Freewheel. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey,
Hi.
Hi.
All right, good. I can see, that's great. So I think that we need to go really to basic question like, what is the difference between connected TV and for example, in-stream video? So is there any differences? Is it technical? Is it price? Is it the way you buy it? What are the key things that are not a difference, and what are the big differences at this stage? So I don't know, Julie, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I think, I mean, it was discussed a little bit in the previous panel. Ultimately, I think it's the premium nature of the content that's just different. It's that TV type content, the lean back experience where you're sitting on your sofa watching TV versus digital video, which could be outstream or in-stream on other types of devices. And with that comes also things like, completion rate and viewability. So I think in terms of how it's transacted, it could be in a similar way, but it's more the nature of how the user views and how they feel like what they're viewing is like TV, like traditional TV, rather than a video playing maybe on their phone or on their desktop or something like that.
Okay, so it's really, from your point of view, it's really like you consume premium content on a TV devices, but you have access to digital advertising, and that's probably something that the user would not notice at some point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Austin?
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for having me. Same question?
Yeah, sure.
I think that's pretty much the user experience element, the viewer experience element of what connected television versus other streaming video brings to bear. But probably a big part that we've talked about as well was like the idea of what distinguishes it from linear, and probably the element around ratings and long form, short form, and is it on demand and is it live? I think the thing about in-stream video is it's kind of always naturally been on demand. So that part's very kind of a normal experience for the viewer. But when you take things that have typically been cemented in a time slot and a network and maybe even in a platform, and kind of have those become connected and at your fingertips and on your own time, that feels like the big difference. But it's definitely very different from, when we started buying digital video and on exchanges 15 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Martin, maybe I can ask you not exactly the same question. I've seen that you were a TV buyer in the past at Publicis, I guess. So from your experience in TV buying, what is the difference between connected TV and linear TV, traditional TV campaign?
Yeah, so yeah, you're correct. So I used to be a TV buyer when I started out. I have worked across all media, including digital media. But when it comes to what the difference is between CTV and linear TV, I think CTV really is that sort of intersection between what we class as traditional linear TV and what we have worked in for the last 10, 15 years from a digital point of view, the digital ecosystem. So all of the benefits that we can get from the digital ecosystem, so enhanced targeting, addressability, automated buying, that's what the promise of CTV is bringing all of that to something that is traditionally very important for advertisers, the linear TV side of it, but also delivered on that big TV screen. So the ability to target content and that consumer on that big TV screen. I think it's really, really, really important to not forget the consumer's role in all of this. The reality is when someone goes to watch telly nowadays, they don't go, well, I'm going to go and watch a bit of CTV content, or I'm going to watch a bit of linear TV content. They just want to watch the content that they want to watch. So whether that is available on demand, and increasingly we're seeing more and more of that, or whether it is the live stream, it's really the content that they're after. What CTV and CTV advertising promises, but I would argue hasn't fully delivered yet and probably has still some way to go, is the enhanced targeting and addressability that you can get from the best of the digital ecosystem. In terms of the linear campaign, though, the linear TV is still very, very important for advertisers, and it's still somewhere where you can get huge scale. And I would say that CTV, whilst very promising, still has some way to go in even achieving some of the scale. It's not yet a place where we could replace a linear TV campaign at scale with a CTV campaign. At best, at the moment, it's a supplementary in terms of driving additional reach to those harder to reach audiences that no longer watch as much linear TV. So I'm really thinking about the young audiences who have migrated to the streaming services quite significantly over the last few years.
Yeah, definitely agree, and I think that's bringing us really to asking to Julie and Austin why do you think advertisers invest in connected TV? Why should they? Is it an opportunity for advertisers to have access to, I would say, an affordable way to access TV? Is it a cheaper way? Is it bringing new digital advertisers to TV? And how can we help as the industry to simplify the message by saying, well, it's almost digital, or it will be fully digital with the right level of targeting sooner. But at this stage, it's already interesting. So why do you think the advertisers should invest in connected TV? Julie, if you want to start.
Yeah, so a couple of reasons. I think, like Martin was saying, supplementary. I would say it's complementary to a linear TV campaign. So advertisers that are already on linear TV can sort of complement their campaigns and reach other audiences by adding CTV to their plans. And then you have smaller advertisers who maybe traditionally wouldn't be able to afford the larger TV campaigns and budgets, who can now kind of venture into that world and start investing with smaller budgets and what we heard before, more testing available, less lead time. You can do it programmatically, so it's kind of a sort of lower barrier to entry. And then generally speaking, different audiences, there's more targeting available. And I think this is maybe not, we're ready for this yet, but long-term, using different creatives based on the data that you're getting back and really make it much more targeted. So not only for the sort of big brands, but smaller drive to store, for example, campaign or drive to web campaigns. This could be very interesting.
Thank you, Julie. Austin, what is your view on this?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the right direction. Like the elements around storytelling, and probably the hardest piece right now is price, and what some of the other panelists have talked about who owns the budget within the agency in terms of making that more of a unified video kind of approach to media buying. That part would be super helpful to get worked out. But I think overall, the advertisers know television works. I mean, I don't think that's the hard sell. I think it's kind of this question of what does connected television get me and why is it a little bit more in terms of price?
Okay, thank you. So one thing I think, which is, I guess the answer is different by country, and obviously we will not talk about the US market, which is quite big, but in terms of scale, in Europe, it's growing. But is it still enough? Is it enough now for an advertiser? Is it like a real challenge in terms of size of the audience in the different countries you work with?
I can take that.
Yeah.
So I would say, just sort of finishing off that last question, I work for an agency representing advertisers, and I also recognise the sort of issue that has been brought up about who should buy CTV. So should it be AV teams? Should it be digital teams? My personal view is that we'll end up with a hybrid or something like this, and this is certainly the way that we are working within our agency in terms of building the capability of both our digital and our TV or AV teams. We've been buying TV and video for many years now. And I think the problems that we sort of see with CTV is actually, and in agencies, and why there might be a disconnect is because ultimately that there is that issue of scale. So I mentioned in the last question about how if I had a £10 million Christmas campaign, CTV is not going to be, at this point in the UK, a huge part of it outside of, say, the broadcasters and maybe YouTube. So it's really quite difficult to then put to really transform the way that you do things when the scale isn't there. It's sort of asking agencies to solve a problem that arguably CTV hasn't really sort of stepped up to the table yet. So I think there's more work to be done there. And I do think over the next few years, we will start to see sort of more ad services within CTV beyond broadcasters and YouTube, which I would argue agency teams are very, very familiar with, and they work really well with agency teams. So I think the reality is with outside of broadcast, outside of YouTube and YouTube properties that sit within there, there isn't a huge amount of scale. So that's where and if we want CTV to be a true part of the AV strategy overall, we need to see players outside of those sort of really emerging. I expect it will happen in the next couple of years to see one or two people really disrupting, but I think everyone at the moment is sort of in a challenger mode rather than in a real disruptor mode, and I think that's really what's needed to happen. Because then once we've got the ads products, therefore we'll have the scale of inventory, and then people really will want to invest more in this area, because as we've said, TV works for advertisers. It's going to be difficult for us to get people to migrate to somewhere where there isn't a huge amount of scale.
Okay, scale is one thing, but there is, like, when you all talk, you say you compare CTV to linear TV, but in some market, and I know that Sky is doing that, and it's now we're making big progress in France regarding addressable TV. All telcos are doing big things to make it available for broadcaster to do addressable TV on set-top box, for example. This is for you. Do you think it's an extension of the connected TV market and it's going to bring scale, or again it's a different market? So my feeling is that it should be as one single market, but I'm very happy to understand what you think about addressable TV.
Shall I take that again? From an agency point of view, we would see it all as one market ultimately. There might be different routes to buying and accessing the inventory, but you really need to consider the addressable element, which has been in existence in the UK. AdSmart's been around for years now, and that's about to expand in 2021 with Channel 4 entering that market with Sky. But the reality is we need to consider that in with the linear TV, because there's different price points for each of those. So you'd say linear TV is probably the cheapest because it's got very broad targeting. And then you've got addressable TV and also CTV, which I think is they're ultimately the same thing. When a consumer is looking to access content, they don't really differentiate between the two. It's just a method of delivery to get the ads in front of them. The price points are different, and that's what adds some complexity in what we're trying to do when we're planning and buying these campaigns. But the reality is that we have to consider it all. One of the big gaps in the UK specifically is a lack of holistic data, deterministic data that actually links all of those ecosystems. So you've got an established ecosystem with Barb, which is 5,200 homes, which linear TV has been planned for many, many years. It doesn't have huge scale, but it's very rich in the sort of targeting that you can, the way that the panel is put together, and therefore quite relatively robust to operate that market on. We don't really have the equivalent across CTV and video and addressable TV yet, and so it's very hard to turn around and go, well, what proportion of an AV budget should I put to a digital or a CTV provider? What proportion should I put to a broadcast video provider or YouTube? There's nothing that's linking that. So what we're doing in the background is trying to use as much data as we can, working with our partners to try and get that data linked together as much as possible. It isn't the holy grail and it isn't deterministic, but it helps us make those decisions. And I think that's something that I expect will come in the next couple of years, because you do, as Graham said in the last panel, you've got the likes of Samsung who owned a TV set, so they have a view of that consumption that arguably you don't get currently from Barb, and it's the same with other providers as well. So I do think we'll get more sophisticated data across that TV screen, which will really help us be able to plan more coherently across those across all of those platforms, and therefore link TV, addressable, CTV all together.
Thank you, Martin. I guess, Julie, at Freewheel, you work with many broadcasters, so you're really close to the discussion about linear and addressability and scale. And how do you think you can, as a platform, or how the market should do in terms of reducing fragmentation and making that really the buying very simple for advertiser?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there's a lot of work to do still. Again, coming back to, I think the first, I think it was what Daniel said, collaboration and innovation. So I think in the future, we'll see more companies working together and innovating and collaborating because of this sort of widespread fragmentation. Also, I would say in terms of, our panel today, which is CTV and versus addressability, I think within CTV, not all CTV is actually addressable. So meaning we still need to do a lot on CTV itself as well in terms of targeting and what data we can use and what insights we can get from there. And then to unify it with linear is really, the holy grail, like Martin said.
All right. And Austin, what is your view, Xandr, on this?
I think that the idea of convergence is one that's been really popular lately. So the idea that you can kind of have this one-stop shop plan across, it's challenging because you just butt up against other walled gardens. So from a buyer's view, convergence to me would be like talking about the audience that you can reach. And that's just not going to be true to the word if you can't kind of extend that into Instagram or, YouTube and stuff in terms of trying to understand how the fragmentation is really impacting your media spend and where you're getting your return. So when we look at ways to collaborate and partner, I think that's really an important element. It's going to be the buyer and the seller kind of finding a way to collaborate, and then even the third parties that help fill the gaps, or AI to help kind of understand what else could have been reached. Reach and frequency is ultimately the cornerstone of TV. So making addressability and reach and frequency real across multiple silos is going to be the real holy grail, and combined with television.
Right. So I guess it's we have some questions. So probably this is the last question, which is if you think that you have to predict something for the connected TV market in the next 12 months, what it is. And I will start with mine, which is, and it's probably because I'm based in France, where IPTV is big and set-top box penetration is very high, is that I think that the scale issue is going to be reduced by the linear addressable inventory. So meaning ad switching on a broadcast feed on a set-top box, as Sky is doing already in the UK, and that's going to be live very soon in France. It has been authorized now, and there is a lot of hope, but obviously the scale is there, because if you look at the audience of a big broadcaster on set-top box, it's more than half of the audience viewership in France, so it's really big. And the question behind that is really now that it's going to be done. So segmentation is going to be good or not, and I think that the next challenge now is to work on data and how telcos, for example, and broadcasters are going to exchange data, and because telcos, they have some first-party data, but broadcaster also. So there is a lot of discussion about that, but it's going to bring a lot of opportunities in terms of segmentation and targeting in a very premium environment, because it will be on the premium content of the big broadcasters. So I believe that scale will come from addressable TV and set-top box in France, but that's my prediction for the next 12 months. But what do you think? And maybe Austin, if you want to start on this.
I mean, I think the idea that television is not dead in Europe is really important to remember. And so the idea of scale, you're absolutely right. Wherever the viewers are, if the viewers are still majorly consuming on broadcaster video on demand, whether that's set-top box in France or an app in the UK, the elements of making things relevant and addressable and collaboration getting us there and regulation not impeding that, I think that the next 12 months will be very telling, because I think COVID has kind of pushed everyone indoors, and we've seen higher than ever, CTV transactions across the platform. So it's definitely growing. I agree with Martin that it's not at the scale that everyone would like, but it's a positive momentum.
Thank you, Austin. Julie, so if you have a prediction.
Yeah, so I will sort of look at it from obviously my position and from a buyer's point of view. I think there's still so much potential. You know, in Freewheel, we grew our CTV revenue by 300% over the last sort of 3 quarters. And I think it's just starting. We've done a lot of education to buyers, to agencies, and also brand direct about the ability of or what CTV can do really for them. And I think there's still some hurdles, like we've just been discussing, you know, the whole morning. But I think it's just going to have some exponential growth still to come. And buyers will become more savvy. They'll better understand what they can and cannot get from CTV and addressable, and yeah, onwards and upwards. And I think, like Daniel said, there's still a big unknown, but it's looking very positive.
Thank you, Julie. Martin?
So yeah, I've actually got 2. The first one is, I'll try and do them quickly. The first one is probably more 24 months rather than 12 months, but I do expect that we'll get another, and this is UK focused, another sort of ad-funded disruptor emerging within the UK marketplace. It's too big an area for the SVOD suppliers to just continue to dominate ongoing. So I do expect that will happen. And I think the second one is a bit sort of a more softer measure, but I do think we're going to see a lot more alliances between various stakeholders within the field. So I think within the UK, we're going to see a lot more content providers align with each other to help drive these new products. Because as I say, once we start to get the ad products and start to grow the scale that supports it, then it's very likely that those ad pounds will follow.
Thank you, Steen, Martin, Julie. We have some questions, so I'm just discovering the question now, and I'm going to share that with you. So the first one is, how do they see planners buy CTV with no cookie and limited data to target? What needs to change on the buy side, and what tech can help with more targeting buying? So obviously, targeting and CTV, how does it work? So
I'm happy to have a view on that. So so job of an agency ultimately is to navigate the complexity of a market for our consumers. So in this space is navigate that complexity and join the dots as much as we can. So the reality is that we need to work with different data sets. I can talk about the holy grail of a holistic, deterministic data set, but we're not there yet. So therefore, we need to work with the data sets that are available and work with our partners to deliver better, more robust data. So that could be working with panel-based data or working with bigger TV and connected TV media consumption data sets, the likes of Sky, for example, or even Samsung TVs. They're really, really interesting, and they allow us to add insights that can actually drive our media plans and determine the role of CTV on a campaign. In terms of the tech, I'm not a tech expert, so I won't go too much into that, but I do think the ability to navigate those bigger data sets really quickly, so some products that will help buyers and advertisers to navigate that and understand what actually, if they're going to invest a certain proportion of cash on CTV, what is the expected return from that? That's what our jobs are, and that's what we are doing. But if there's tech solutions that can help drive that will make it even better. And that's the sort of thing that we're working with our partners on to try and deliver.
Thank you, Martin. Austin, any comment on data and connected TV and targeting?
I mean, there are a couple of approaches. One is, a sophisticated hashed email. Another would be, infosum bunkers. But in some ways, there's some simplicity too. So television often has been touted as the show can have a demographic, so just based on show type and categories, day part, you know, like if someone's watching at a certain time of the day, they're more likely to be in this, you know, bucket. So I think there are some simplicities to CTV buying that programmatic display has definitely not trained us well for, you know. We think about it way too amped up sometimes.
Thank you. Julie, anything to add on targeting and data?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the moment, at least from what I'm seeing in Freewheel, it's pretty basic. So vertical sort of content targeting, you know, targeting certain channels within CTV publishers. It really depends actually on the media owner and the publisher. So of course, you know, at Sky you can do something very different than at Pluto. So it's still, I think, in its sort of basic infancy, at least if you want to buy sort of aggregated and at scale. But hopefully this will improve as well in the next sort of 12 to 18 months.
Right. The next question is about vPaid. So I can answer to this one, but vPaid is not working as far as I understand connected TV, but maybe you have a different experience.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right. And the next one is about limit in terms of the length of the video. Is there any unified spec, or does it vary from one media to another?
I believe it varies, but if you go any longer than the sort of standard 15 to 30 seconds, it'll be very hard to get scale, because there's not a lot of publishers who will allow that, because it ultimately sort of harms the user experience. So I would say that it's probably possible, but it wouldn't help you if you want to reach a large audience or across very specific verticals or something, because you won't have any scale.
So we would say like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds would be the standard format?
Standards, yes.
Yeah.
I think the trick that we found with some buyers is to do deal IDs that allow 60 seconds. So, you know, it's going to be at a big premium. So I wouldn't think that you'd be going to market with anything other than a 15 or 30. But if you do go for bigger, you need to pay for it.
And by the way, right now it's based on CPM, right? But is there a correlation between the duration and the CPM? Like you pay more for 15 seconds than 10 seconds, or?
It differs.
It
differs across provider.
Okay, so sometimes you can have a 30 seconds at the same price of 10 seconds.
There are instances of that, yeah.
Okay, so it shows that there is still a kind of a need of alignment probably at some point, and I think that publisher needs to understand that it's very important for the market and for advertiser to standardize as much as possible, not having the same price, but at least the mechanism behind the price, like duration, should be, I mean, they have to decide, but probably it makes more sense to pay more for 15 seconds than 10 seconds, but that's my concept. That's quite basic.
You would pay more in linear TV. If you were doing a print ad, you'd pay more for a full page than you would for a half page. It's logic, isn't it?
It is. And I think we have one last question, which I discover now. Would take example like Samsung and AdTech, SpotX, Freewheel, Xandr, for example, need to have equal ownership as a broadcaster? Do today in the future ratings? So the question is about rating system in a cross-media deterministic. So if a cross-media deterministic is a pass. So question in few words is about ratings, measurement. I mean, is it something that should be controlled by broadcaster or publisher? Or what the platform and the ad tech has to say in terms of measurement and rating?
So I can start with that one. There is a project currently going on run by the WFA, the World Federation of Advertisers, their Origin project, which is designed to do this, to link everything together. I think one of the key things is having buy-in from all the stakeholders and you know, having all the right stakeholders there. So if you get to a world where it's too digital or too broadcaster focused, then it's not going to serve the purpose of what the aim would be. So the likes of say Samsung and ad tech providers being in there, they'd need to make sure they have a proper role within there in terms of what are they actually measuring? Are they measuring that content and who's viewed what it, and also they would need to have, I'd say, would need to have some stake within that as well. If you've not got any skin in the game, then is it really going to be? Is it really going? Would it really work? So what we don't want is a world where you have, where we are today, actually, you've got a really rich, established in the UK broadcast TV measurement platform, and then digital is done completely differently, often on a one-to-one basis, and there's no connective tissue between the two of those. So yeah, I think people would need to have equal interest within that.
Okay, very clear. Julie, Austin, anything on this?
I think it's a really curious question. The idea of who owns ratings, you know, like can grade your own homework and, you know, like all of that is definitely one that we haven't really gotten to. Like we're still stuck fixing how do we, you know, get the money to flow? And then this element of how do you get it to be measured? And then how do you make sure that that measurement would be, you know, fair, equal, unbiased, I think is very important. But I'm not sure exactly what is the path to making it that way.
All right, Julie?
Yeah, I agree with Austin on that. I think it shouldn't be owned by someone, and it's everyone's responsibility. So again, it comes down to collaboration and innovation. And I think, you know, ultimately there'll be one standard based on who's adopting it most. So I guess it will be to be seen who's gonna like take it all in that sense.
Okay, and very quickly, a last question is about media planning. Is it still something which is done for connected TV, or it's not like TV media planning? And the question is, are we still talking media planning with connected TV and viewer probability? So
I'm not quite understanding the full question, but I'll have a go at answering anyway. I mean, as I say, we look at the whole holistic TV ecosystem. So that would include broadcast, linear, that would include addressable, that would include CTV. So, and we source the best, most relevant data and insight to drive that. So from that point of view, yes, we would plan out CTV, and we would plan it as part of the wider TV and digital campaign. As I say, we've moved away from just purely TV buyers many years ago to have a video AV buyer that covers video and TV. So all of this would fall into the same ecosystem within our group.
And I think this depends really at the moment per agency. So, you know, obviously in Publicis, that's all in one group, but I know in other agencies, these things are still split. And we would have maybe someone, you know, talking to the sort of broadcaster team, someone to the programmatic team, and then there's the sort of digital planning team. And, you know, they'll obviously internally all work together, but it's not necessarily working as one team yet. But I think this is changing as well. And it's something that agencies are talking about a lot internally, I think. So there will be some changes in that over the next 12 months as well.
Thank you.
And I guess the idea of the viewer probability, it only makes me think of kind of, you know, a lot of brands know who they want to reach. So if they want to kind of follow a consumer along a journey and they want to plan kind of ahead and kind of reserve those viewers, that type of planning to me, the more, I guess, buy-side focus is what I'd be curious to see pan out in terms of, you know, how we plan today versus how we can plan with all this data.
All right. So I think it's time to stop, and I would like to thank you, Austin, Martin, Julie. I hope it was useful for our audience. There's many questions, many opportunity also in connected TV, and it's moving very fast. So I guess we'll have other opportunity to speak about it soon. And thank you for IAB Europe, Helen and David, for hosting this event.
Thanks, Stefan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. That was such a good panel. And I really appreciate you all sharing your insights into the scale of CTV, something we're all expecting to increase rapidly in the future. So we are now going to plow on because it's almost 25 minutes past the hour. So we're going to go straight into the next panel. And that last panel wrapped up really, really nicely, actually, coming into conversation around measurement in CTV, and also the lack of use of vPaid, both of which are very applicable to the next panel. So we're now going to discuss connected TV targeting and measurement. And I know many of you, as we had in the last panel, and many of you on the call are wrestling with this issue in CTV. And I am aware of many myths relating to CTV measurement and targeting. So it's going to be really interesting to hear from our next panel, and I'm sure many of the myths will be dispelled. So again, don't forget to submit your cues or questions for the panelists using the Q&A box located at the bottom of your Zoom window. And I'm now delighted to introduce the moderator for this next session. Noémie McKee, and as VP of Client Success at MediaMath. Are we there?
Yes, hi.
Fantastic. Hello, Noémie. The floor is yours. I'll hand over to you, and please, introduce your panelists.
Thank you very much. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us for the third panel of the day, where we're going to be talking about measurement and targeting in connected TV. A special thank you to the panelists for taking the time out of your busy days to participate. My name is Noémie. I'm VP of Client Success at MediaMath, a leading omnichannel media buying platform. I'm really pleased to be part of today's discussion, as like you all, I'm finding it exciting to kind of see the rapid convergence of television and digital advertising and be part of the new opportunities that it's throwing up in our industry. I've always been a big believer in necessity breeds innovation, and considering the new normal that we find ourselves in today, it's not surprising that advanced television is getting more and more attention from brands, publishers and broadcasters. But of course, we can't kind of do a copy and paste of digital tactics and apply them to TV. So we're seeing a lot of challenges, and some of them we've talked about already, around how best to approach connected TV. So we're going to take some time during this panel just to unpack some of the challenges and solutions related to targeting and measurement. Joining us today, we've got experts from IAS, Oracle, ComScore, DoubleVerify and Kantar. I'm going to kick off with the first question, and to capitalize on time, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves as part of their first answer. So in regards to CTV, could you share with us some of the challenges you think are slowing measurement solutions down from standardization or quick adoption? And I'm going to ask Carol from ComScore to take the first.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having the Yanks come on to the panels today. So I'm Carol Hinnant. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of ComScore. And I thought the ending of the last session kind of segueing into this was perfect, because it was all about the challenges of measurement and what the agencies and brands are seeing with connected TV. So it's really terrific that connected TV really does merge perfectly television and digital capabilities together. So you get the reach and frequency with the ability of the addressability of digital. But the challenge for connected TV kind of in the current state is really from a representativeness of the marketplace, a standardization of the various connected TV manufacturers. It's one thing to have TV shipped, but it's another thing to have the data harvested and then standardized in a method that is consistent across the various groups. So I think that that's kind of the biggest challenge that we're seeing with the adoption of the data today.
Great, thank you. And John, could you give your kind of point of view on what you think the challenges are in terms of getting to a standardization?
Yeah, hey everyone. So John Ross, I lead connected TV products for DoubleVerify. So yeah, the fragmentation issue is huge. Pros and cons of connected TV. One of the cons is from the kind of standardization viewpoint, there are just a lot of devices. There's a lot of operating systems. There's a lot of app stores. It's hard to kind of get that group together, aligned on a single approach, and then build the technology side of it as well. So this is kind of a Herculean effort. What we see is, okay, this is great. We could get a kind of merger between linear and digital, but at the same time, the philosophies behind those are quite different, right? So it's trying to get alignment there. And thankfully, we do have the IAB to kind of help push this through, which is amazing. But it just takes a lot longer. So for like viewability, for example, we don't have that yet, and we probably won't have that for some time. So more to come there.
And maybe, John, just to kind of capture a bit what you said, how do you think the market should be working together to move forward in that standardization? Do you think it's going to be a big coming together of all the different actors, or do you think it's going to be more fragmented efforts and kind of there's going to be strong case studies that will come onto the market and they'll kind of set the bar and it will get higher and higher? How do you kind of see it unrolling?
Yeah, hopefully the later, especially with the IAB in place. We're all a part of this group, all the big players essentially. And so look, we're in these working groups together. We're hashing out the plans. Let's just move forward with them. It'll obviously take a lot more time than that, but that's at least a great start.
Cool, thank you. And Kristen, maybe you could share your point of view on the subject.
Yeah, sure. So Kristen Roberts, so I'm Global Product Development Director at Kantar, working quite a lot on our CTV as well as the digital measurement tools. So I think John's really touched on the key point there is the fragmentation. And so what we see is obviously the fragmentation of the market is in a way mirrored in the measurement. So there are obviously multiple different methods that we can use to measure CTV. Obviously none of them have really scaled to a point yet. And a lot of that is the cost effectiveness of that. So, I think advertisers quite often look at these and they see that, CTV at the moment is a small reach on their plans. And so the cost of measurement often is slightly too high for the value that I think they often see they're going to get from that. And I think really from an advertiser perspective, there are measurement options available and many different methods that we can use to measure that activity. But what is appropriate really, I guess, depends on the objectives of what they're trying to get out of that measurement, and also what type of activity they're planning, which providers they're using to deliver that CTV as to what is possible, and also then the budgets that they have. So the budget that they have. So we have between anything from a passive measurement solution, which are typically more expensive and harder to execute, through to the probabilistic approaches, which are much easier to scale across markets, but obviously a slightly cheaper version because we're not having to fund, the passive measurement panels and get through all of the hoops that we have to jump through with GDPR in terms of the approvals to be able to track passively that activity.
Okay, so you've kind of actually put a nice segue into the following question, which is going to focus on if I'm a brand or an agency and I'm thinking about running connected TV. Let's say I've got budget I want to spend on it to try it out in the run up to Christmas. How should I go about measuring the effectiveness of that campaign? What kind of KPI should I be thinking about? Who should I be speaking to in the market to kind of help me identify what those KPIs could be?
Sure. Do you want me to follow on that one?
Just sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, sure. So I think, in terms of the measurement, again, it sort of really depends on what, as an advertiser, you're aiming to achieve. So I think the key thing is really to evaluate at the start of that campaign, what are you trying to achieve from the CTV activity? Are you looking to get incremental reach on your campaign? Are you looking to, really drive home some messaging with specific audiences? And from that, you can start to then work through and think about what is the most appropriate method for that measurement. And obviously, depending on how much budget you have to spend on that activity, probably depends on how much you're willing to spend on the research and measurement as well. And I think the key thing, there's different types of measurement we can talk about. There's the audience side and the more kind of reach and frequency element. And then there's through to, the brand impact. So are you really trying to drive, greater awareness of your brand or stronger associations with messaging? And so all of those factors really can define what type of measurement is most appropriate for you. And really, I think that's the conversation with the research providers to work out, what is the best option for me and what will give me the greatest analysis and insight that I could then improve that activity going forwards and maximize that ROI.
Great, thank you. And Sarah from IAS, what's your kind of thoughts on how should brands go about measuring the effectiveness of their campaigns when they've got kind of CTV in their media mix?
Sure. So I'm Sarah Canarday, Senior Business Development Director at IAS. So obviously, first and foremost, brands need to know that their ads served actually to a CTV device, right? So I think there's a lot of ambiguity, as we just covered, a lot of fragmentation, lack of transparency still in the market in terms of, I give some of my money, did it actually serve to a CTV device, to a real human? Was it seen? Was it in the right context? Do I know what apps I served into? So I think that really kind of, setting that baseline standard of what are you buying and is it what you expect is really first and foremost on the top of the list of what brands should be looking for. And then, as Kristen kind of alluded to, there's a lot of optionality in terms of where you can go from there and kind of determining effectiveness of your campaign.
Nice. And Carol, could just ask for your thoughts on that.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I think that I agree definitely with what Sarah and Christine had said. It's like, I think that each brand may bring their own, kind of desired outcome-based solutions or interests to the campaigns. So I do think that there's a consistency that they want to be able to measure across platform. And so we have to be able to get to a point with CTV where the metrics and those solutions that are being provided by the various measurement kind of make sense, both with the digital and linear campaigns that they're running across the board. So I do think that it is pretty nascent right now, especially in Europe as this measurement is just becoming available. The fragmentation is out there. We've got to try to figure out how to connect that all together and how to have that sense. And I think that kind of independent third-party measurement is very key to those solutions.
Nice, thank you. And George, we haven't heard from you yet, so love to kind of hear your thoughts on the measurement, but also maybe you can lead us in to talk about what extent connected TV is suffering from kind of verification issues. What form is this fraud taking, and what best practices should brands take to protect their media dollars?
Sure, thanks. So hi everybody, I'm George Head of Client Development for Publishers and Platforms at Oracle Data Cloud. And so yeah, I think these two questions do kind of go quite hand in hand. So further really to what Sarah was saying, there is a baseline of measurement that brands can look to ensure they achieve, which kind of can be summarized as valid, viewable, and brand safe. And then it's really a question of whether they can go a bit deeper and use technology and also ultimately kind of good media buying sense to ensure that they're suitably protected and know exactly what they're getting from their campaigns. So really, I believe in the idea of combining technology with, good human judgment to get the outcomes that are needed. So we kind of dig into the technology side of it a bit more. And invalid traffic is an issue within connected TV environments, just by dint of the fact that this is very high value premium inventory commanding high prices typically, and where there is you know, that opportunity, yeah, you can be sure that there'll be people trying to game the system and ultimately fraudulent actors. So you know, I think across this panel there have been successes where technology companies have helped to prevent the OTT CTV space from being kind of overrun with fraudulent actors. You know, beyond that, those kind of baseline metrics, one can be looking for a more detailed understanding of campaign performance by using kind of deeper measurement metrics and looking to connect those to outcomes, real outcomes. And the stronger that proxy relationship between the measurement metrics of an individual ad impression and the outcomes, obviously the better. So the deeper you can go, the better, whether it's using things like audibility of a given ad or a number of other deeper metrics. And then just quickly to finish off on the kind of human side, I do think it's really important that if a brand is working with a technology provider, they're also asking of them, you know, how does this look? Do you have benchmarks that help me to understand these metrics in relation to other campaigns or other activities? And ultimately, the kind of very simple sniff test of, you know, does some of this look too good to be true? Because in this sector, it probably is, right? Like the costs of production of the content that these ads are running around, by definition, mean that the cost of media should be reasonably high, and if it's not, there's probably something amiss.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that point. And it's important that even if there is a tech provider in the middle, that buyers and sellers still have a relationship there. Thank you, George. John, can I maybe bring you back into the conversation for your kind of take on the form the fraud exists in CTV and the best practices that you recommend brands consider when setting up their CTV activity?
Yeah, definitely echoing everything George communicated. I'll focus maybe on one portion, which is basically knowing where you're buying. That's key. Like, CTV is being billed quite literally in dollars, but also just from the marketing point of view as a very premium space. Yeah, we see a lot of buyers, quite honestly, are almost buying blind. You know, they either do a direct campaign, fork over the dollars without knowing, did it actually run in connected TV? Did it run with that, seller? Or they buy through a DSP and rely on bid stream data, which may or may not be accurate. And a lot of folks just say, okay, it's premium, I don't need to go further. And quite honestly, that's a very wrong approach. Even with the kind of direct campaigns, a common practice by sellers is to use extension networks, where maybe 90% of a campaign runs with a publisher that you're paying, but then 10% can go elsewhere, can run basically as murky as open marketplace. A lot of folks just aren't privy to this kind of deal, but it's actually very common. And so that's something where buyers, we have to demand transparency. We have to say, okay, you're selling this as linear TV essentially. Okay, why can't I understand where it's serving, what device, what app, what content, all those levers. There's no reason we can't get to that today, even from a technology point of view. So really, it's pushing for that parity with linear, in my opinion.
Nice, thanks very much. And I guess it's fair to bring in on this topic as well. Sarah, would love to hear your thoughts on the challenges of verification within CTV.
Yeah, and exactly what John and George were getting at. We always tell our clients to make sure they have the conversations with their partners, their media partners, their data partners, their verification partners, making sure they understand exactly what they're getting. And then from there, we really do encourage our clients to really push their partners, their supply side partners, their DSPs, their SSP partners, their publishers, to really enforce the standards that do exist. There aren't many, but for example, in December of last year, the IAB did release app naming guidelines for CTV devices. And we actually ran a study in the summer in the US and saw that less than half of the supply has started to adopt those standards. And really those standards are needed to have scalable ways of validating that buyers are getting what they want. So we do know it's an important need for buyers to understand that, but really it does rely upon the industry kind of rallying together to kind of make it scalable for everyone, right? Not only to buy it, but also then to verify it. So that's really, those are the kind of the two key things that we always kind of implore our clients to really be out there asking their partners for one, transparency, and two, standard adoption.
Nice. Okay, one kind of final question that I've prepared before I open it up to the floor. What excites you the most about the future of OTT and connected TV measurement? And feel free to maybe bring in some of the things that your own companies are working on. I'm going to kick off by handing over to George to answer that first.
Sure, thanks. Well, I mainly work on the sell side with some of the large broadcasters, so I thought I'd give a sell side centric take on this. And I'm also from the kind of programmatic background. So what I'm hoping is that as we kind of increase the adoption, accuracy, and thoroughness of measurement, we should help to actually prevent the commoditization of this very premium inventory. So if we kind of look at what's gone before in the programmatic space, publishers have really had a tough time drawing themselves up out of a belief that there isn't really a concept of scarcity in their market. And what accurate measurement should do is truly differentiate the value of different media sources, allowing the cream to kind of rise to the top like it should. And that should, create an opportunity for those creators of fantastic content that we work with to build sustainable businesses for the long term, where that high quality content can remain ad supported, and I think that's actually a genuinely quite important outcome for us as an industry to aspire to. So that's my big hope, is that we avoid some of the issues that we have seen with high quality publishing in the other parts of the digital landscape, and I think there's an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, publishers and broadcasters should be rewarded fairly if they're providing good content. So I like that point. Carol, would love to hear kind of what you're feeling excited about going into 2021.
Sure, and I agree with George completely that content is king. No matter the platform that it's served, content is going to drive consumer interest, and therefore you should be, rewarded for that good content that you're providing. I think the exciting thing about connected TV is it's television. It's a living room. Lean back, big screen, enjoy the content that's up. So it really is about being able to measure it in a traditional fashion of, hey, we want to be able to see both the content measurement and the ads so that you can plan for it, so you can avoid some of the problems that come in when it is more of a programmatic approach. So I think you want to reward, that content placement. So I think that kind of the census level approach that is provided for each of these platforms, and then having a standardization so that brands can see that as we aggregate those various CTV platforms, I think that that's going to be very important to kind of drive the success. And I'm happy to see that we've started that in Europe, really kind of being able to harvest that measurement and then try to make that jump into kind of providing the metrics that will help the marketplace move forward.
And can you expand a bit on how you're doing that? Because I've actually just seen one of the questions that's come from the audience. It's Holy Grail equals single source census measurement across all devices. for CTV at the moment, would measuring CTV audiences accurately be a valuable start for the industry?
I think maybe everybody saw our announcement just either last week or the week before. We just entered into the European market with the connected TV measurement. So our hope is to be able to take that where we started. We're in the UK and Germany today. We have contracts to expand in probably the big 5 markets today, and then see how that goes. But along with our panel-based digital measurement, what we're hoping to do is create the same solutions for our global customers, and it's who's really driving the interest in ComScore kind of expanding. We want to take the solutions that we have in the US and to be able to really provide those in the markets that our clients are interested in. So, we're just in the early phases of that today, but we are working with the data sets that we have in the same manner that we work with our linear television data sets. So it's device-driven return path data, and making sure we have that session level, both at the content and ad, and overlay the scheduling information to that too. So it's quite a laborious task, but I think it's very important in order to get that quality and to be able to reward the content and drive the premium CPMs for the platforms.
And is GDPR a big challenge to kind of get?
Yes, we have to make sure that we're GDPR compliant. And so that is a huge focus of ours as we move forward. And I think it's one of the things that what's old is new again. And I think it's our panels are becoming more and more important as we drive those solutions.
Great. And I think you've already answered this, but another question's popped up. I don't know if you want to add anything. It says, besides census measurement, how will you enrich these data with more insights on viewers?
Yes, we do plan to, as our kind of tactics are in the US, where we overlay richer data sets. So we want to bring those advanced audience solutions and really value the impressions based on the quality of the audience, not just the quantity. So we expect to kind of look to expand those rights. We don't have those today, but that's where our thought process is. Again, kind of just, we are leading the market in those advanced audiences in the US, and we want to see that play through in Europe and other countries as well.
Great, thank you. And speaking with some of the verification guys, one of the questions that's popped up is the fraud risk really high with this medium, or is there a tendency towards scaremongering? So John, maybe I can get you to give your opinion first.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at it over the years, at least in DV's data in like 2018, there wasn't much fraud. It just wasn't being tackled yet. 2019, it started to scale a bit. And then 2020, this year hit us. Basically, the fraud is now at scale. It's basically at parity with desktop mobile type of fraud. So yeah, unfortunately, it's where we are today.
Okay, and Sarah, is IAS seeing the same?
So along the lines of what we kind of discussed earlier is, if we see clients kind of just flipping a switch on the open exchange and kind of blindly throwing their money into the ether, we do see, some issues that we have to work with those clients to understand and then rectify with those partners. We do see, the clients kind of doing a lot of due diligence upfront, seeing lower levels of risk, but spoofing is definitely at play. Again, we have a lot of players. We're seeing, take advantage of the fact that there's very little standards and a lot of fragmentation and kind of a lot of opaqueness, right? So they may be selling something at a CTV CPM and really delivering a mobile or a desktop impression in a lower quality environment.
Nice. And just, I guess in the interest of time, quite a strong question to finish with. Will we see the big players, ComScore, Nielsen, etc., moving to mergers and acquisitions to pick up measurement leaders in the CTV digital space? don't know if Carol, you want to answer that?
Well, I can't speak for the other party, but we have certainly partnered to be able to have the data sources. Many of the participants in the not only in this panel, but the earlier panels today are already our partners in the US. So I think that you can see ComScore will be doing more collaborations. You know, I don't know if we'll really fulfill, you know, any M&A work, but it's always a possibility. And I think that you'll see that we're really ready and willing to work with the marketplace to figure out solutions to help grow the business for everyone. I think, you know, all boats rise when we can come up with the solutions. And we have a long history in EMA of, you know, working with Kantar and others, you know, on the JICs. So I think you'll see that continue as we move forward.
Nice, great, thank you very much. I'm going to finish up with, I think there's a poll that the IAB are going to launch. Apologies, I've not managed to get through all of the questions that have listed, but hopefully we've kind of discussed a wealth of materials. So the poll reads, what is the top metric you use to measure CTV campaign effectiveness? Is it reach, viewability, engagement, video completion rate, CPM, or brand lift? My answer. And whilst we're waiting for the results, just want to say thank you again to all the panelists for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the IAB for hosting today's event. I think the results are in. Okay, so as I kind of expected, reach is in first position with 41%. Then there's video completion rate, followed by viewability, then brand lift, engagement, and CPM cost is at the end. Great, thank you very much. I will hand back control. Bye guys, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was such a good panel, really well moderated, and lots of food for thought. So thank you all, Naomi and the panelists, for your views. And it's great to hear the future looks bright for measurement and targeting in CTV. And thank you, audience, for all your questions there. I definitely enjoyed all of them, and I liked the high note at the end. It was a very punchy question to end on. Now on to our final panel. We're going to have a look at how privacy relates to CTV, in particular solutions for GDPR and post third-party cookies. To lead us through this panel, we have Ninon Wagner, Privacy and Compliance Manager for IAB Europe, who's going to take us through this conversation that many of us want to pay really close attention to at the moment. And there are some really challenging topics here that I'm hoping, Ninon, you and your fellow panelists will help us at least work towards a solution there. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Ninon, if you're there.
Yeah, thank you, David. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I hope everyone can hear me well. So this last panel will focus on how data protection laws impact connected TV environments, discuss the solutions and challenges for achieving compliance with GDPR and the e-privacy directive. And finally, we'll look at how addressability on CTV can be affected when privacy principles are leveraged in the same manner as browsers do with third-party cookies for web-based services. So to do this, I am very pleased to introduce our experts to talk about those very interesting topics. So we have Aruna Sharma, Group VP, Lead Counsel Global Privacy and Tech and DPO at Xandr. Alex Cohn, Senior Director, Product Management at IAB Tech Lab. James Prudhomme, Executive VP International at Index Exchange, and finally Zachary Farouk, Marketing Solutions Engineer at OneTrust. I know this is very early for some of you, so thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions during the discussion, don't hesitate to enter them in the question box, and we will run through them at the end of the panel. So the first point that comes to mind when comparing CTV with web-based or mobile services is the fact that smart TVs or related devices manufacturers use many different operating systems, such as Android, Tizen, Roku, etc. So, Zachary, what are the technical challenges for a CTV app builder or its provider to implement a consent management solution on CTV and leverage IAB transparency and consent framework?
Hi everyone, thanks Ninon. Yeah, as Ninon said, Zach Farouk, solution engineer here at OneTrust. Work specifically with publishers on implementing CMP capabilities across web, mobile, and CTV OTT. Thank you for having me today. I think you mentioned it in the question. One of the biggest challenges that we see is the tech lift that's required in order to implement privacy solutions in the CTV space. And that's because it's quite a fragmented marketplace at the moment. Sometimes, unfortunately, actually, competition prevents competition in other areas because it increases the barrier to entry. So unlike the web, where you can create a JavaScript SDK and that is just going to work across all of the different browsers, albeit with some nuances, you don't have that capability within the CTV space. So you look at, Samsung that runs Tizen OS, LG that runs WebOS. You've got Fire Stick. There are so many iOS TV OS. So there are so many different operating systems that you actually have to build out your CMP in every one of those operating systems in order for it to be surfaced in the different TVs that your consumers may be purchasing. On top of that, one of the big challenges is when we start thinking about the user experience where, maybe they've got a Samsung TV downstairs, but they've got an LG TV upstairs. They still want to consume your content across those two different TVs, but what you're going to be asking them to do is consent downstairs and then go upstairs and reconsent again upstairs if you're not able to handle cross-device or cross-environment consents. So I think that's also one of the key pieces that's imperative from a CTV perspective when we start thinking about privacy and keeping the customer's experience a big part of just the regulatory consent that we may be trying to capture.
Thanks, Zach. And with regards to interoperability between the publishers and an ad tech partner like Index Exchange with regards to user choice, what could and should be further improved in this environment, James?
Well, I think in the CTV environment, things like the TCF have yet to really address the nuances of it. And so I apologize that I missed a lot of what Alex said because I've been having some connectivity issues. So I'm just starting the call a little bit late. But I think that is that very are likely to engage with a new kind of data and privacy terms and conditions and those sorts of things exclusively within the CTV environment. So in other words, they're likely to sign up for services over a web browser or using their mobile device. They're likely to consent to the privacy terms and conditions using those other devices. And then in most cases, they're most likely to simply log in once in the CTV environment and then have an authenticated experience all the way through that. So I think that, from an ad tech perspective, the notion of identifying users through these consented identifiers or consented mechanisms, and then, being able to, how do I put it? Being able to kind of work that back, if you will, to the consent they've provided on other devices will be key.
Thanks, James. The browsing experience is also much different on a TV set than on desktop or smartphones, notably because of the remote. So, Aruna, how to achieve the level of transparency and offer users the granularity of choices required by GDPR across devices?
Yeah, sure. So I think that standardization has come up before in different contexts, and I think that's also here should be one of the guiding principles. If we look at this from the legal perspective, and at the GDPR requirements with regard to notice and consent, with regard to the CTV environment, we have to look at the founding principles, which are, for example, general accessibility. So notices and consent need to be easily accessible. And then there needs to be transparency. That is one of the other guiding principles in that space. And how do we create that? And in my opinion, given that there are so many different devices and so many different technologies that consumers are confronted with, the path forward is really to have a standardization of notices and consents across the industry that goes across specific technologies. Because the more of these disclosures consumers are seeing with different ways of how they can consent and where they can find it, I don't know how many people have looked at various notices on CTV. It is very complex, very hard to understand, and really not helpful in the interest of consumer privacy, which I think should be a guiding principle for everything that we do in this space. And so I think the transparency and consent framework, especially TCF 2.0, is actually a really good example where we are seeing a standardization of consent notices. They're not all the same, but at least if you're a consumer and you're coming to a website, you're more likely to see the same type of disclosure and the same type of mechanism. And I think it would be in the interest of everybody to establish something that works across, with, of course, being aware of all the technical challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Aruna. Indeed, standardization across devices would really ease the user's understanding on what the specific purposes of our industry. In terms of the practical approaches adopted on those devices, Zachary, what have you seen in terms of UIs and user journeys to maintain the ease of navigation on TV set?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I totally agree with Aruna there in regards to standardization. I think it makes it much easier for consumers to understand what it is they're being presented with, rather than it being different everywhere that you go across different devices. I think one of the challenges, specifically with regards to the TCF and the CTV space, and it was mentioned earlier that you have a remote, you don't have a mouse. And specifically the TCF, we've got a lot of purposes, features, special features. All of that needs to be able to, fit neatly on the screen. And while we have big screen sizes, what becomes harder is navigating through those with a remote rather than a mouse. I mean, we've spoken to partners and prospects, and they've been talking about experiences where potentially you move to another device in order to do the consent piece and to address TCF, because the ad tech ecosystem are crying out for TCF and CTV. So they're putting pressure on the publishers to start passing TC strings. But the TCF itself as a policy and framework doesn't cover the CTV space. And that goes back to the technical issue in regards to, how do you standardize the integration? We have the JavaScript API in the web for passing on consent, but within the CTV space, that's not standardized, and we're looking at more than just Android and mobile in mobile apps. So from a UI perspective, it is possible to get it on the screen. It's just how do you make that nice and easy, and when do you present it to a user as well? Is it like what we see on websites, where the first thing you will get is a banner right in your face before you even decided to trust the brand or want to work with the brand, because you can't see any of the content because there's this big banner in your face because they want to sell you ads? When do you present that to a user in the CTV space? Do we need to start thinking about that experience a bit more and say, well, actually, it's fine. We'll give you contextual ads so that you can get to know us and we can get to know you. And then beyond that, we'll start asking you specifically for consent so that we can start looking at doing things like personalization. But certainly, I think, you can fit it in the UI, but there are lots of workarounds that we're seeing talked about in the marketplace at the moment that certainly don't breed the best customer experiences.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks a lot for the answers. I think we'll move now to the second part of today's discussion. There is much talk on the demise of third-party cookies by browsers and Apple's change to IDFA. Alex, who takes the role of the end-user agent in CTV environments, and is there a threat that they would follow the same movement when it comes to data sharing?
Yeah, I mean, you think about, well, first, the direct answer to the question of who takes the role. I think there's still the same question that there is in web and mobile, in the sense that, you know, there's a lot of people with claim to be, you know, the first party, I guess, or the user agent. There's the TV manufacturer that makes the hardware. They potentially could have a claim. There's the operating system, if that's different than the TV manufacturer. Then there's the app itself. And you know, we've seen interesting news articles in even recent time of companies kind of battling one another for that control, I guess, to get access to user level data. So I think the jury's still out on who acts as the user agent. To get to kind of Zach's point, the user experience around you know, control of, you know, any sort of data collection or data uses is going to be a different experience altogether. You know, I think there's different user experience claims that you can make there. One could say, well, you should just do it when you set up the TV, and therefore it's probably the TV operating system that is the user agent, and then kind of takes control in the same way that you know, potentially like iOS has taken sort of steps with iOS 14, and they're sort of shutting off an identifier if you don't get consent to their specific pop-up. I think, though, there's an interesting case at the app level, though, and thinking about what Zach was just saying of, you know, waiting a little while to potentially show like personalized ads. I was thinking about, well, you know, you still need an identifier actually to do frequency capping. And one of the worst experiences in TV is getting the same ad again and again. And my kids even say, like, why do they keep showing us this ad? Aren't they having to pay for that? Like, yeah. So potentially that could be, you know, there could be an argument on the user experience side, at least, that, you know, having control at the level of the actual app that you're watching TV through. So if that's, you know, HBO Max, or if that's, you know, whatever it is, Netflix, who doesn't show ads right now, Hulu, you know, that could be a user experience argument there. But I think we will, you know, because of Android's ubiquity, and not just on mobile devices, but also on TVs, we may see, you know, large platforms taking sort of like a perspective that they should be in control. And hopefully, though, in that case, you know, like with Google joining TCF, potentially we'll see, you know, a platform like Google, who does have a lot of share in operating system sort of UI, adopting standard approaches to transparency and control. But that's a hope right now. We don't know what the movement will be there.
Thanks. Yeah, to follow up on what you were saying, Aona, what would be the possible way forward for the industry to ensure convergence towards more interoperability between all of the different players in the CTV ecosystem?
Yeah, so of course, totally agree with Alex, and think that in this space, I mean, the question becomes, I think what we talked about before, notice, consent is kind of like a micro issue, but the macro issue is how do we ensure that there is industry participation in developing processes that work across? And you're mentioning convergence, right? That we have a process that is just standardized. And how do we ensure that in this window of opportunity, I think that we currently have, before large platforms just create facts and determine the process. And I think it would be really in the interest of consumer privacy and transparency, and of the content providers finally, that there's wider participation and determination of how should things look like, how should we do all this. Of course, the technical details, I defer to the other experts we have here on the panel, but think that efforts like TCF 2.0 have been setting up great examples. Xandr has been very supportive of TCF 2.0, and of course we have to go beyond that. But I think overall, independently of what technology we are talking about, we have to resolve this issue. And that's usually done best if all the players come together and work on an overarching program. And Alex, I'm sure I can talk more about a lot of other efforts that are out there. But yeah, so I think that is probably the most promising way forward on this issue.
Thank you. And also it seems that CTV publishers have larger logged-in audiences than traditional media. So does it make them and their tech player partners better armed to deal with addressability issues? James, what are your views on the possible limitation to access CTV device identifiers?
Well, I think you're right that CTV publishers or OTT publishers with CTV apps certainly do have an advantage over traditional media publishers today in with regards to the reach that they have in terms of logged in environments. Alex was absolutely correct when he sort of highlighted the kind of complexity, and I would even call it the sort of nested complexity of the ecosystem. So between TV manufacturers and operating system providers, and then you have apps that run ecosystems of apps. So if you take something like Plex, for example, which a lot of people use, Plex has its own app ecosystem, running within its own environment that runs on Android. So that just the layers of complexity are just confounding in some cases. So if you look at the announcement, I think it just came out yesterday from ITV in the UK. I think that's a good example of what publishers and broadcasters will try to do. They're effectively sort of creating their own walled garden. So they have their own environment, users are logged in, they're offering their own ad technology solutions for advertisers to target those people. And then I guess in some ways trying to circumvent either the TV manufacturer or the operating system provider, and just trying to create a closed ecosystem. And I think we've seen other examples of that with broadcasters across Europe as well. I think it's a smart idea. I think time will tell if it's a successful idea or not. I think, Aruna's points are all really well taken in terms of the industry, coming together and trying to work together and collaborate. However, I think the allure and the draw of creating your own walled garden, I think, are just going to be too strong at this point. And I think a lot of different players, broadcasters, TV manufacturers, Samsung just announced the release of their own DSP, operating system providers, you name it. Everyone's going to try to make a play for having their own closed ecosystem and their own closed environment. I think if you let that play itself out over a few years, a lot of these people might realize, hey, we are better off collaborating and creating a more open ecosystem. But I just don't think that will be the norm in the early days. I think it will take the industry a few years to get there.
Thanks. And Alex, do you think this alternative to device identifier relying on logged-in environment may have limitations as well?
I mean, at the end of the day, to get back to kind of Aruna's point around principles, like the principles of the regulations that are governing data protection and privacy right now wouldn't necessarily make a distinction between, I'm not a lawyer, but what in my mind is a product person too, like those principles of like, whether the user's identified by an IFA or whether they're identified by being logged in, they're being identified. So yeah, I think interestingly, you see, however, at least in other ecosystems, for instance, in Apple's ecosystem, they've got the sign in with Apple that's actually, in a way could take over the ability of sort of publisher closed authenticated ecosystems to be able to identify users, because the sign in with like Apple sort of obfuscates their sign in to only Apple knowing who that user is. So like the same thing could happen in TV. I don't know. I think that's going to be a very debated space. But another point that I think has been made here is that there is an opportunity right now in TV where there's, there are a lot of people making walled plays, to James' point, but there's not as much like prominence of any one singular player. So there is an opportunity, if we were to act proactively a bit on standardizing things and making things more predictable, that we could maybe preempt some of those moves that sort of turn CTV into the cat and mouse game that browsers have been, and now that it seems like mobile operating systems are becoming.
Thanks. Yeah, so from what you're saying, the way users are identified, if this is through an ID or HTML, doesn't really matter in the eyes of the regulator, which is true, but the bigger threat right now would be that privacy can be leveraged for competitive advantages. Yeah, and if but because the ecosystem is more fragmenting than for web or mobile services, there is more room to work on interoperability when it comes to users' transparency and control over the data. Maybe Aona, you want to add something on this? I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I agree with Alex, agree with James. Of course, I mean, there is the incentive for platform providers and others who have the ability to build walled gardens to do that. But I think overall, longer term, it is really, Alex, to your point, yes, absolutely correct. The requirements are technology neutral. You have to provide notice, and there's no prescriptive requirement of how this has to be displayed, which leads to a lot of uncertainty, of course, but which also clarifies that there should be a way, or that could be a proactive project for the industry to develop something that works. Because if you're operating within your own environment without input by anybody else, you can also, of course, take the wrong turn or establish procedures that may actually not work out or may be criticized by regulators. So I understand that the incentives are there, but I would say it is still very much a longer term, the longer term project goal should be that everyone works together, because this is an industry where there's a lot of data flows, exchange of data, and yeah, so I still think that would be the right approach. Understanding all the challenges and difficulties. Don't want to make it sound easier than it is.
Thanks. We have a few questions from the audience. The first one is about excluding HBB-TV technology from the field of CTV. When it comes down to privacy in the HBB-TV technology, the broadcasting network operator, like Archiva or Cellnex, is guarding the technology and thus provides arguably first-party data. Not sure who in the audience wants to take this. Who in the panel wants to take this question? Okay.
I'm not sure if I understand the question exactly.
No, me neither. And second question is, I think, for Zachary. It's about TCF 2.0 on TTV. Are there any CMPs which are able to deal with TCF on CTV?
Yes, of course there are. OneTrust CMP is ready to go in CTV and OTT space, and there are other providers out there. It is definitely something that I would advise you to look at if there are any publishers watching, because while a lot of the talk today has been on what can we do to standardize, the reality is there is a regulatory requirement today that CTV does fall under, and that you should be looking to address. I think I'm quite interested to watch what happens with the paywall in Germany. It's been driven out of Germany, but TCF has now introduced derogations based on this, which effectively allows a switching or a choice to the user between AVOD and SVOD within the CTV space. So I think that's something to certainly watch out for from a UI perspective as well within CTV for TCF.
Thanks. So we have run out of time, but I would like to thank you all for your participation today. I'm sure it was helpful for the people who joined. I now hand over to David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ninon, Aruna, Alex, Zach, and James for that really interesting discussion, which raised many important issues and provided some thoughts as to the solutions for these. Well, we're at the end of the virtual connected TV event, and I'm delighted you were able to join us today. We've had over 300 dialing in today, and we really hope we'll be able to meet many of you in person before too long. I want to thank our sponsors for today's event, OneTrust, Preference Choice, which you saw on the last panel, and Magnite, who also featured today. And we would not be able to put on these events without your valuable support. So thank you. I'd also like to thank all our panelists and moderators for giving up their time, sharing their knowledge and views on the important topics that were discussed and debated today. I'm sure many of our attendees will have taken an idea or more away that will be used to improve their own business. And I'd also like to thank Helen Massard, Lauren Wakefield, and Jules Mantle from IAB Europe, who all have worked tirelessly to deliver this event. And finally, thank you to all of you, the attendees, for tuning in. We really appreciate your time. And if you could take a couple of minutes to provide your feedback in our short event survey at the end of this session, we would be most grateful. The event recording will be available on IAB Europe's website over the next few days. So please do check that out, and all the other reports and guides are available there. And as mentioned at the beginning of the event, all our speakers are from IAB Europe member companies. And as I also highlighted, IAB Europe is the leading European level association for digital marketing and advertising ecosystem, and represents national IABs, media, technology and marketing companies to lead political representation and industry collaboration to deliver frameworks, standards and industry programs that enable the digital advertising business to thrive in the European market. Our members span the entire digital advertising and marketing ecosystem, from publishers, DSPs, SSPs, intermediaries, other intermediaries to agencies, and it really is an opportunity to meet, network and create great working relationships with leaders from across Europe. And as many of the panels have highlighted today, collaboration is needed in all aspects of the ecosystem, and this is a great way to do it. So if you are keen to become a member and or participate in any of our upcoming events or committees, please do get in touch with Helen or Charlie. That's it for today. Thank you one last time and stay safe. Bye-bye.